Good evening, YouTube. It is Tuesday night. We are talking fantasy football here. You know, we talk a lot about PPR leagues. We talk a lot about 3-receiver leagues, but we don't do the other formats quite as much. So this is a format show, a ton of different formats to talk about. Also, more reaction to the Buccaneers news. And email us at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. Please hit subscribe. Please vote for us at podcastawards.com. Please hit like. You know the drill. Here we go. It's a 3 for Tuesday. Doesn't have the same ring as a 2 for Tuesday, but 3 episodes today. If you're listening, you're hearing this on Wednesday morning. You hopefully heard our bonus podcast, Dave and I breaking down the Chris Godwin and Julio Jones news for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now you're going to hear about that from Jamey Eisenberg and Dan Schneier. But the main, the crux of today's show is non-PPR, half PPR, full PPR, Superflex leagues, 3-receiver versus 2-receiver, 4-point versus 6-point, salary cap leagues, fab leagues, all these different types of fantasy football formats out there. How do things change in different formats? We are going to discuss that on today's show. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you to Jamey and Dan for carving out some time tonight. Appreciate that, guys. All right, Jamey, you were not on the bonus podcast, so give me your reaction. A few hours out from the news of Chris Godwin being cleared for training camp and Julio Jones going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a 1-year deal. What do you got?
Obviously great for Godwin that he's not on the PUP list, which gives you optimism. Gives me optimism that he should be ready to go for week 1. He may not be the same Chris Godwin as he's working his way back from this, only 7 months removed from the ACL tear, but clearly he is trending in the right direction, which is awesome. Julio Jones signing, I don't think is going to have too much of an impact on those top 2 guys, Mike Evans and Godwin, but it's going to be an impact. It's certainly going to be an impact to Russell Gage. Godwin's return is certainly an impact to Russell Gage. So Gage goes from somebody, in my mind, that was a borderline number 3 receiver, somebody that you could potentially draft as a starter to open the season, to now more of a number 4 option. And hopefully he will be better than Julio. Julio is 4th on the depth chart for me, fantasy-wise. But I think you could consider him a potential number 3 receiver. If he's anything close to form, anything close to his 2019 season, or obviously of his heyday in Atlanta, my God, is he going to shatter ADP? He's going to ruin everybody else there in Tampa Bay, and could be what we saw at times when Antonio Brown was the best receiver in Tampa Bay, the best receiver for the Buccaneers. Obviously, it's great news for Tom Brady to add another quality weapon, guy that he can, I hope, trust. So, easy top 10 quarterback, certainly top 5 upside. Yeah, it's just, they're playing Madden. They're just taking whoever they want and putting it on the roster, and it continues to work out for them offensively.
Okay, so I did this with Dave. Let's go through the draft with these 4 wide receivers and with Tom Brady. And you both, Dan Schneier's here as well. You can follow him at Dan Schneier NFL, at Dan SCHNEIER NFL. There's a ton of vowels in there. But let's get, all right. Who's the first Buccaneers wide receiver drafted? Is it still Evans, or would you change to Godwin?
Still Evans for me.
Same. As of now.
And does he move down to is he round 3 guy now? Because he's never, he's not a PPR stud. He's a very reliable PPR guy, almost a guarantee to be top 15, but not typically making your top 5 or anything like that. So is he a format specific guy? Like when would you take Mike Evans?
So I always thought, and I'm curious to get Jamey's take on this, I always thought he was going a little bit higher than he should have before the Godwin news because of exactly what you said, Adam. I didn't think the offense was going to all of a sudden revolve around him as a major target PPR type of guy. I still think he's playing a similar role within the offense, no matter who's really around him. So with that said, I would still typically rather have him around that round 2-3 turn, even a little bit into round 3. I know that's a little bit, I guess, bearish on him, but ultimately, for me, what you said, Adam, is true. Not only does he not have a huge history of a massive role from a target standpoint, does have a little bit of an injury history. It hasn't been recency bias wise. It hasn't been popping up lately, but he's still the first Bucs receiver for me off the board. But I wouldn't take him in round 2 where he's going right now.
I would agree. I have a tough time with the group of Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown,
same
Tyreek Hill, and I'll throw Michael Pittman and DJ Moore in that group. And Mike Evans was clearly ahead of them prior to this, and now he's in that jumbled mix. So I can't believe what I'm about to say, but I would draft in PPR Michael Pittman ahead of Mike Evans.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think I'm going to. He's still early round 3, but he's now gone from late round 2 to early round 3.
Okay. And when would you take Chris Godwin?
Godwin was a guy that I was looking at in round 5 prior to this news, and so now I will actually move him up into the round 4 range. So he was, I think, wide receiver 23 for me. I'll probably move him up 3 or 4 spots, so 19, 20. As reports continue to come out that are positive, he will get closer to 15. And I would not be surprised if we get to the last week of camp, last week of the preseason before, when a lot of our drafts are happening, if I do move Godwin ahead of Evans, because in PPR, as we've seen, that's the spot that Tom Brady tends to favor, the slot receiver. He was awesome last year. I think he'll be awesome once again. And so, Adam, you and I were texting about this earlier, and obviously I was joking when I said to you about now Evans and Godwin are ruined by this signing. But I wasn't joking when I said Tom Brady's going to throw to the open guy, and he proved that last year with Evans. But Godwin was kind of, I think, a little bit, coverage averse to an extent, because of where he lines up and the routes that he runs. So if Godwin shows that there's no effects of this ACL tear whatsoever, and the fact that he's not on the PUP list clearly gives you an indication that he's heading that way, I would take Godwin over Evans at PPR if we get to that point where it looks like that's the case.
And one thing that really stands out to me, I'm curious to get your guys' take on this as well, is just how this shapes up the entire Bucs wide receiver core, schematically speaking. Like classic Julio Jones back in the days where he was in his prime, running 4-4 flat, he was an X receiver. But at this stage of his career where Julio Jones is at, he's honestly almost more effective as a big slot. And I'm not so sure they signed him to be the X, because that's a position that Mike Evans has played for them at times. And you move him over to the Z, it's possible he can play on the other side of the formation on the outside. I get it. But maybe they're looking at it like, well, look, we did this with Antonio Brown last year. He was able to win on the outside still as a vertical threat. In that case, then yes, I'm very high on Godwin, but I'm definitely a little concerned. I want to watch this in camp. Like, will they start to transition Julio Jones to slot? Because Godwin at Penn State, he can play on the outside. This is not something he can't do. He's done it a little bit with the Bucs as well, because that will change my whole kind of perception of this offense if Julio Jones was signed to play big slot at this stage of his career, which I'm not saying is the case, but it's something I'm looking out for.
I will also say that if Julio Jones is as good as Antonio Brown, and I said this on the bonus pod, so I won't get too far into it, but I know you might scoff at that, but last year Antonio Brown was 33 years old and he finished as a top 12 receiver per game. In fact, the Bucs had 3 top 12 receivers per game last year in full PPR. It's amazing.
Though he did come in with some rapport with Brady, right? Not a huge rapport, but some.
Yeah, where they played one game together.
And physically better.
Together.
Yeah, right.
And physically much better.
Dave said, Dave pointed that out, that Brown wasn't dealing with a bunch of injuries. But I think before he got to the Bucs in 2020, nobody expected him to have the impact that he had. No. He was a steal, even, I don't know, maybe in the 8th-ish round of drafts in 2021. And in the first 6 games of the season, Brown missed one of them. But so that means they played 5 games together, the 3 of them. Gronkowski played in only 2 of those games. So there were 5 games at the start of the season that all 3, Brown, Evans, and Godwin played. And the targets were 39 for Godwin, 39 for Evans, 42 for Brown. Yep. He had the most targets, barely. And he may have been the most productive in those 5 games. I didn't have a chance to do that. But, he could. Julio Jones, if he gets back to form. You said 2019. Look at 2020. He was amazing in his last. He only played 11 games, I think, but he was incredible. Had a career season, in some respects, like on a per target basis with Atlanta. And I did see that. Antonio Brown really did affect Chris Godwin's targets for sure. Not as much Mike Evans, as he wasn't a heavily targeted guy for much of the year. He just caught a ton of touchdowns, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Julio Jones bounces back. And he could take from them. So, and
then just, by the time we get to November, Gronk will be back too. So
yeah, just think about what Jamey said at the top of this, because it's so true. Tom Brady will throw to the open receiver. That's why there is value in a player like Julio Jones. That's why I was drafting Russell Gage before all this news as well. So that's the key here. And I think that does impact a lot of hype for Godwin.
Gage is clearly the biggest loser.
Yeah, now yes.
He had so much potential if Godwin was going to miss the start of the season before Julio Jones. And he still might be good. I don't want to rule it out. He still might be good. But, man, the path to production has just, been closed. It's like there's a detour, and you got to find a detour quickly.
And they paid him, too. That's the interesting part. The way they really just, like you said, Jamey, it's like a Madden thing. They're just adding as many bodies as they can to this group.
So finally, guys, when would you draft Julio Jones and Russell Gage? And who would you take first?
I'm still going to lean Gage first now, but they're almost going to be like back-to-back. And I would say probably the earliest, with the anticipation of Godwin being healthy, I would say probably round 9, round 10 for both.
I'm going to be more bullish on Jones just because I believe in the value of replacement value. So even if he gets hurt, I'm fine with just scooping somebody from the wire. You're not losing too much if you're drafting him. Agreed with Jamey, though, no higher than like round 9 or 10. But he's definitely now moved ahead of Gage for me, unfortunately, because I do have a lot of Gage shares from the early drafts.
Yeah, I took a lot of Julio Jones in the mock drafts.
Nice.
I ripped for it every time. Why didn't you take Will Fuller? You're going to take one of those guys. So, unfortunately,
Who ripped you for it, and who speaks in that kind of voice?
A lot of Jamey.
No one talks. Jamie's never spoken in that voice ever in his life.
Listen, Julio signed with the Bucks. They just put Sammy Watkins on whatever list it was. What if we get Will Fuller to the Packers?
Packers just don't make any of these moves though. Like we've been saying that for like 17 different veteran receivers they should have added the last 2 years. I don't know why they just won't do it.
Well, now they might have a reason.
They added Sammy Watkins.
Sure, they did add Sammy Watkins.
All right, now the format show begins, and we actually have a lot more news to get to as well. A lot of players, like Leonard Fournette's
lost. It was a busy day.
That's good.
Super busy.
It was a busy day, yeah. What is your favorite format? Schneier has been like drooling to come on this show and talk for him. He loves this. What's your favorite format?
Well, I love one specific format. I wasn't drooling to come on and speak every format. I'm drooling to come on and speak about auction salary cap drafts, which to me are when you play Madden on All Pro versus the Snakes, which I believe are Madden on Rookie, to be completely honest. With the auction drafts, it's kind of the same deal every time I talk to anyone who I've convinced to do it with their home league. They try it. It takes a while for them to try it, but once they try it, they never even consider going back to Snake. Because think about it, from an auction, from the standpoint of just the format of both, right? With a Snake, if you draw the 7th pick, you have let's say you love Christian McCaffrey, or not even Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. You think he's going to be 200 points higher than any player. You have no chance to get him. And you're so pigeonholed into drafting certain players at certain spots based on ADP or reaching, quote unquote. In the auction, you can do whatever you want. You can go studs and duds. You can pour a lot of your budget into a specific position. Like, let's say you're in a PPR league, you can go heavy on wide receiver, tight end. You can wait on quarterback and getting to fun situations there where you don't have to pay a lot for a quarterback because everyone's filled their quarterback slot already. There's a lot of different unique things about an auction that I like, but very few of those apply to snake drafts. So that's my case for auction. I really hope everyone gives it a shot. And there's no better live draft experience than an auction. You get someone that's a good friend of yours to do the auctioneering. Everyone has a great time of it.
Yeah, Jamey will do the voice. Who's up next? Now it's Mike Evans. See,
when did Jamey get this voice that you're
yeah,
I don't know.
This is a new thing.
We're
it's all-time newspaper guy. Yeah, see,
yeah. Are you really calling Jamey old?
Read all about it. Anyway, we're calling them salary. We call them salary cap now. So used to be called auctions. Now we call them salary cap leagues. So they are super fun. They do take a long time. I think that's the only drawback. But yeah,
it has changed though. Like we have the technology where we could do salary cap drafts. I don't know how you want to phrase it, but salary cap leagues on the site, and so it makes it much quicker. It's not as much fun.
They're longer. They're longer than.
Oh, they're definitely longer than snake drafts, but it certainly gives you the ability, as Dan said, there is no more fun draft, and again, I'll use that in quotes, draft experience than doing a live salary cap league, especially if you have a live auctioneer. But my goodness, if you still like the format, you could still get away with it.
Yeah, for sure. Jamey, what's your favorite format?
I guess my favorite one would be, Superflex. PPR, 3 receivers, it's not that trendy anymore. Used to be, but I think, there are so many good quarterbacks, and like I tease Adam a lot, obviously, when he takes 2 in our, 1 QB leagues where nobody else for the most part is taking. Maybe one other person is taking 2 quarterbacks, and so Adam does it because, hey, I'm getting the best player available. Look at me, I'm so special.
Yeah, it is. I'm so special.
But it's a mock draft and it doesn't really matter. In a Superflex league, they do matter. And I did a segment today, which, I know you guys will be interested in because it's Daniel Jones with Emery Hunt today on CBS Sports HQ. And we were going over a few player over-unders. And Emery is not the biggest fan of Daniel Jones.
Way down on Jones.
He said to take the under on his 3,500 passing yards. And I don't disagree with that tremendously. I don't know if he's gonna, be a 4,000-yard passer.
3,500. That's
Well, Adam, part of
Well,
that
you're
he's baking in that he thinks Tyrod will take over at some point.
no, I don't know if it's just necessarily Tyrod. I think there's still the Jimmy Garoppolo rumor. You're getting value, I think, on that. Just at some of the scenarios.
I don't hate it.
But
He's
what
injured
I
a
was
lot,
explaining, Emery was doing the over/under. I was basically just giving the fantasy analysis, and I said like he's the type of guy that I like to take a shot on in a super flex or 2 QB league as my third guy, because if he hits, because I do think he's going to run a little bit, if not maybe career high based on Brian Daboll's offense, plus whatever he's able to do just in a better offense with a better offensive line, hopefully some healthy weapons. I think he could surprise a lot of people. And so those are the type of guys like I have an enjoyment drafting,
Right.
I'm not going to really draft Tua or Trevor Lawrence or, in some cases, Jameis, you put Justin Fields in that category too. But even, let's see what, maybe Geno Smith could do. Let's see what, Jimmy Garoppolo could do if he ends up in the right spot. Let's see what, Baker Mayfield does. Those guys aren't exactly going to be the greatest fantasy options, but they'll be fun to use every now and then in the right league. And Superflex and 2QB gives you that opportunity. So I like to, get the most out of what the quarterback position is, because it really just doesn't get as much use in a one quarterback league as it probably should.
Yeah, it's the most important position in real football. So why in a one quarterback league it feels very limited, because like you said, you're not even considering drafting guys like Tua. They're on the waiver wire, and you can go even lower than that. Now every single player at that position, the most important position in real football, gets assigned an actual value from a fantasy standpoint. You have to evaluate what they're worth. So to me, that just
Superflex is great. I was going to say that's my favorite format too. I think if I was recommending Superflex to someone who hasn't done it, I'd probably recommend a 10-team league.
Yes.
Because a 12-team Superflex or 2-quarterback league is tough. If your quarterback gets injured, you're really in a lot of trouble. So
12-team 2QB is rough. I would say if you're doing 12-team, you should definitely do Superflex over 2QB.
Right. And if you're in a Superflex league, you should treat it like a 2QB league. But that if you're desperate for a flex, you could always just flex and you know what? Why don't we just make our 12-team 2QB league a flex league?
I think I might.
Yeah. By the way, real quick here, I'm not a Daniel Jones guy, I promise.
Okay.
If he plays 17 games, he is definitely going over 3,500 yards. That is so.
Yeah,
but that's part of it. If he plays 17 games, he's been injured every year of his career.
He was like another one that we did, just for example, was Elijah Mitchell's over/under is like 900 yards rushing, and so for me that was an easy under, because I'm banking on what we've seen. History of the leading guy not staying healthy and not finishing the year, back to back. Plus you have different bodies in a running quarterback. And so if Elijah Mitchell stays healthy, he's going to shatter that most likely.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things to promote real quick. I think, the first one I'm going to promote, only a few days left. Please vote for us on podcastawards.com. And I'll leave it at that. Fantasy Football Today, the video version, is coming to CBS Sports HQ near you. Ooh. Anyway, if you download the CBS Sports app on your Roku, on your Apple TV, on your whatever smart device you've got, you can watch CBS Sports HQ 24/7. This is a 24/7 sports streaming network that's not got the screaming head. I won't even say talking heads, the screaming heads that you see on the other networks that are just filling your brain with nonsense. This is really smart sports analysis and coverage. It's highlights. It's kind of old school. It's for real sports fans. Good gambling advice, great fantasy advice. But Fantasy Football Today will begin next Monday, right?
Next Monday, 12 o'clock Eastern. Honestly, the most screaming that you'll get is our show. I mean,
very fun show.
The usual me, Dave, and Heath yelling at each other. It's going to be fun during the month of August because we have a lot of our guys, our NFL guys are at camps, so Pete Prisco is going to be with the Bucks tomorrow. So, forget about our show next week. Pete's going to be, boots on the ground with, everything that's happening there with Julio Jones and Chris Godwin. Will be a lot of fun reporting there. He was just in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne. I'm surprised, Adam, you didn't reply to my tweet where Etienne told Pete he's in the best shape of his life.
I didn't see that.
And then Josina Anderson and Brian McFadden were just out in Las Vegas with the Raiders, and they're the ones. It's funny how NFL news has changed. They're the ones that got Devontae Adams to say the quote that's been making the rounds everywhere about who the Hall of Fame quarterback is. It was in an interview with the two of them. So our guys do a fantastic job. I'm sure Jonathan Jones will be out, in some places. Trying to think of our other NFL guys. Danny Cannell, Brady Quinn, I'm sure they'll be doing stuff, so we're going to have for the most part, every camp covered. And a lot of that will be on our show. Again, Monday, noon Eastern, CBS Sports HQ.
News and notes. Leonard Fournette is back to 245 pounds. Are we back to being comfortable with him in the middle of the second round?
For me, 100%. I think if you look at the workout video he posted too, like people are like, oh, it's still 245 pounds. He's a huge athlete. He's a tall running back. Like he carries that weight a lot differently. In that workout video, he didn't look even close to out of shape. So to me, I was buying the dip. So, and I still like him a lot, but there is some concern now with all the weapons the Bucs have added, at least for me, that there's going to be a little bit less of a target share for him.
Yeah, I think, this was one of those stories like you want other people to buy it if you like the player.
Yeah.
And you like the situation. And for me, I never moved him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was 260 pounds. You weren't going to move him anywhere.
That's true. Well, unless I held a donut or something, maybe follow.
Trey Lance, San Francisco is going with Trey Lance. They are moving on to Trey Lance from Jimmy Garoppolo. And is that what you needed to hear, Jamey, to move him up in your rankings?
You're not going to like this, but he's in my top 10.
Love that.
Ahead of, this is the one you're not going to like. I have him ahead of Joe Burrow.
Daniel Jones. Oh, yeah. I think I'd take him. Well,
I love that.
In 4 point. I don't know about Burrow. I don't think so. I think I'd stick with Burrow.
I know you'd take Burrow. Look, most people are going to take Burrow.
Every year somebody makes the jump. Who's more likely to make that jump, at least the quarterback position from that QB2 range? Who's more likely than Lance? In your mind,
a 6-point league, Burrow.
Well, who plays in 6-point passing leagues are pretty rare, though, Adam.
Not for us. Not on CBS. That's our standard. So, I mean, outside of that, I think ESPN standard is 4. You know what? I'd love to take a little straw poll here. We have 98 viewers.
Let's take a straw poll here.
What do you think? No, I'm just curious. I think more people probably play in 4 than 6 overall, but on CBS, I would say it's more 6.
We get, the mentions of our emails when a lot of people say it's a 6-point for passing touchdown league. I just know we get a lot. People mention that. I think more so than they do the other way, because I think it's more what Dan says. I think the majority of the fantasy community plays in 4 points for passing leagues. We don't. CBS
saying that Yahoo is 6. Look at this.
Yahoo is not 6.
Look at this straw poll. 6.
Yahoo is not 6. It's just false information.
Who's in here? Like Satan? This is 6, 6, 6, 6, 6.
Oh my God.
1, 4, 2, 4.
This was a mistake to open it up to the public tonight.
I was curious. I really don't know. But no, I think there are very, very few quarterbacks who have been top 5 in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues without.
Adam almost gave out his social security number there.
Without 30.
What was that Azer stat? Without what?
Very few quarterbacks have been top 6 without, or top 5 without 30 touchdown passes. So I don't see Lance getting to that. Gus Edwards is questionable for week 1, and not sure about Dobbins right now, but they signed Corey Clement. We'll see how this plays out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on the PUP list. All right. Hopefully you're not drafting today, but if you were, is it time to take Ronald Jones ahead of CEH?
Well, Dan did take Clyde Edwards-Helaire ahead of.
I took him like the 8th round, guys, and this was a full PPR league. I still believe in Clyde Edwards having a little bit of more of a role in the passing game than he has had close to at any point in his career. Obviously, remember, he was a big pass catching specialist type at LSU. That was his calling card coming out. That's why Andy Reid said, I feel like I'm drafting Brian Westbrook all over again, which obviously is not going to be the case. He's a tick too slow for the NFL game as far as overall, but we've heard and we've read about the Chiefs going back to some of the old Reid ways as they lose Tyreek Hill and try to adjust their offense. And that means more running back screens is a big part of their game. So I do think it's going to be still part of that, a bigger part of that offense. And look, you're still getting a back in one of the best offenses in football where there's really, I know McKinnon is back in the mix, but as far as red zone goes, I still feel like it could be Clyde mixing in with Ronald there. I don't know. Around 8, I was okay with it.
It's just another red flag.
It is.
I share Dan's optimism to a certain extent that I'm still hopeful, because look, Ronald Jones has never taken advantage of his situation. He had a good stretch of games, when Leonard Fournette missed time, but really that's it in his career. McKinnon took advantage of the situation last year, but we know what his history is. But it's the fact that every time it feels like Clyde Edwards-Helaire has an opening to do something, something happens, and this could just be the next thing that happens. And the reports are that's minor, so I wouldn't blow it out of proportion. But for me, it's more about not necessarily Edwards-Helaire being the best Chiefs running back. So I still draft him first now. It's about comparing him to the guys that he's going around. And it's at this point, what's better for your fantasy roster? A Tony Pollard, who may have not as many touches, but could have as many catches if his role is there. Kareem Hunt, we've seen what he's capable of doing. Chase Edmonds, and the potential upside there. Those type of guys, you may just have better value with those guys as opposed to the CH.
All right, listen, we're getting way too long in the show without getting into the formats. So, Jamey, let's run through the notes. What?
It was a busy day today.
It was.
It's training camp, baby.
Run through the notes, and you can give me just a quick thought on all these things. Sterling Shepard is on the PUP list.
Not surprising. Good news, though, for Tony that he's not, Galladay that he's not on the list, on the PUP list, excuse me, and maybe even Wan'Dale Robinson. But, yeah, Shepard's tough to draft.
Debo Samuel and DK Metcalf reported to camp. They've got some contract issues going on there, but they reported to camp. Tennessee is happy with Treylon Burks' conditioning. So you've had Burks still ahead of Woods, right?
Yes. I'll lean toward the younger player here, the healthier player, and the guy with more upside.
Marquise Brown is on the NFI list, the non-football injury list. He has a hamstring injury. What do you think about that?
Not great, but nothing to panic about. So again, it depends on which camp you're in, that Marquise Brown will be the best Cardinals receiver, regardless of DeAndre Hopkins returning, or if you're expecting just a 6-week window of Marquise Brown being, very good and then falling back to earth a little bit. So depending on which side you are, this will sway you a little bit.
The Colts could re-sign T.Y. Hilton. I don't think that would be a big needle mover for us.
Nope.
Chris Carson is retiring due to a lingering neck issue. He had a terrific career, and sorry to see that, but Chris Carson is retiring. Joe Burrow.
Kudos to the Seahawks, by the way, for giving him some money. Not necessarily just kicking him out the door.
Joe Burrow is going to miss a little bit of time with an appendectomy. He'll have an appendectomy, and that sounds painful, but he'll be back soon. Bill Belichick says Mac Jones has shown tremendous improvement, and Jameis Winston is going to participate in team drills when training camp begins. Jamey, who would you rather have, Mac Jones or Jameis Winston?
Jameis Winston.
Okay. How about Mac
Daniel Jones over Mac Jones?
Ooh. Okay.
100%.
All right, then. I won't keep asking about Mac Jones. We'll take a break here. When we come back, we'll get into formats, try to read some emails as well at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. All right, let's talk about non-PPR versus half PPR versus full PPR. And also, if you want to participate in our Twitter poll, my Twitter poll, do you play in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues or 4-point per passing touchdown leagues? So I've got 4 options: 6-point, 4-point, both, and neither, because some people play in 5-point leagues. Right now, it's 6-point at 43%, 44%, 4-point at 38%, and both at 17%. So
corrected.
We'll see. Well, we'll see. It's early. And remember, these are going to be a lot of CBS users. So
True.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a format, and you tell me a basic strategy. Someone who's playing fantasy for the first or maybe the second time, played 1 or 2, they need some help. Dan Schneier. Hey, Dan, I recognize you from the show. You're that weird Giants fan. You're the other weird Giants fan. I'm playing in a non-PPR league tonight. It's a draft. Sorry, it's a snake draft. What should I do? How should I approach my non-PPR league?
Yeah, in my mind, in non-PPR leagues, it really just increases the importance of touchdowns, personally, in my mind at least. And so that means I'm targeting a lot of players on good teams that score a lot of touchdowns, that are in the red zone a lot and often. And I'm also looking more into those spark play receivers, those guys who can hit those 50, 60, 70-yard touchdowns, because those can often be, in these non-PPR leagues, those could often be some of the best weeks that you're going to get at a receiver, because a lot of those, 8 for 89s that you're getting from Keenan Allen with no touchdown are not really as impactful as the guy who then puts up the 60, 70-yard touchdown on one play. So that's my biggest change. I'm targeting players who are on really good high scoring teams in the red zone a lot, and big play receivers. And I'm also prioritizing running back like I never do, because personally, I'm a very heavy wide receiver drafter. I'm a big believer in getting a lot of receivers, filling your flex with a receiver almost always. When I go to non-PPR, it changes everything for me. I feel like it's almost a race to get the running backs, and I'm prioritizing them in a different way than I ever do. So those would probably be my 3 biggest changes.
Would you take at least 2 running backs with your first 3 picks, at least 3 running backs with your first 4 picks, something like that? Is there a rule of thumb?
For me, no, because again, like I still want to make sure I'm targeting the right running backs, because even in non-PPR, you can still get the wrong running backs. You can get the Mike Davises of last year who are projected to have this big role on a really bad team like Atlanta was last year, going into last year, and they end up doing nothing because they're gonna get you 45 rushing yards, but that's not really any kind of impact. So you're still looking for breakouts like the Davises and those types who are going in that quote unquote RB dead zone, which I know you hate, Adam. You talked about it today, how you're really out on the dead zone. You're going to have at some point, I want to hear some kind of grandstand from
No,
you.
I think what it is I think it's just becoming a little bit overblown, as if there are 0 good players in the dead zone. But I think like in the draft that we did today, a 3 receiver PPR league, which is completely different than what we're talking about right now, non-PPR, Antonio Gibson went in round 5 or 6, 5, right?
Yeah, it was late.
Yeah, and so did 2 other running backs went in that round. J.K. Dobbins, maybe? And I don't know. There were 3 running backs. Like, this is pretty good. I don't care if I'm quote unquote in the dead zone. I'm not passing this up. But all right, so I think you summed it up. Running back is obviously more important. Make sure you're drafting the right one. Anything to add on non-PPR, Jamey?
No, I think we had this conversation maybe during the draft for tight ends. Guys like Pat Fryermuth with Dawson Knox. Similar to what Dan is saying, you're looking for touchdowns a little bit more. So that changes things for comparatively to somebody, let's say like a Cole Kmet.
Yep.
All right. I'll be a little bit of the outlier here, and I'll just say that there is 0 chance I'm not walking out of there's a 2% chance. I'll say a 2% chance I'm not walking out of a non-PPR 12-team draft with fewer than 2 running backs in my first 3 picks, because I don't want to get in that dead zone. I don't want to rely on that. I want the best running backs and the proven ones.
Well, here, just to go back to the mock draft, we did a non-PPR mock draft last week just to give you some examples of this. I started running back with McCaffrey and Fournette, picking from the number 2-3 spot. Dan, you picked at the 6th spot. You went Cook and CeeDee Lamb. So and then round 3, you took Cam Akers. So you had 2 of your first 3. Adam, you went Chubb and then Diggs and then Dobbins. So again, you followed that strategy as well.
Right there, I was like, oh my God, if I didn't take 2 running backs with my first 3 picks after the proclamation.
I think if I remember correctly, just as I'm looking at it, Will Brinson did not take a running back early.
Right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. He did. He went Jamar Chase, Aaron Jones, and T. Higgins, Chris Godwin. So he only went 1 running back in his first 4 rounds.
A lot of PPR guys there too.
I couldn't do that. Yeah.
And I don't think that makes you an outlier, Adam, because I think that's pretty much what me and Jamey subscribe to. While I don't want to go 3, 4, 5 running backs in that dead zone, 2 of the first 3 picks I will in non-PPR. I want those to be running backs for sure.
Right.
I'm sure Jamey, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, let me just look at it. I think I was probably planning on Fournette or Barkley, because it went Fournette to me, Samuel 23rd, and then Barkley 24th. So I was probably taking either Fournette or Barkley, whoever was there. I think it's interesting to see if I remember just writing this. I think it was. I should go back and find the story. I'm sorry. I don't want to speak out of turn, but just looking at it, the first 8 picks were all running backs in that draft. So it went Taylor, Henry, McCaffrey, Eckler, Harris, Cook, Mixon, Chubb, and then it was Kupp, Jefferson, Chase, Kelsey.
Let's talk half PPR now, and maybe now I should give the numbers that I sent to you guys before the show, which is really eye-opening stuff here.
By the way, I refuse to look at any more notes from you unless you treat me like the Cardinals are treating Kyler Murray. So you pay me every time I look at the notes that you send, and then I will look at all the notes.
Okay, but it's going to be in your contract. You have to look at the notes.
That's fine.
This is all way above Adam's pay grade.
Paying Jamey is definitely way above.
Yeah, exactly. You can't control what Jamey's getting paid.
So here, what I did was I looked at the top 36 finishers in non-PPR, half PPR, and full PPR in each of the last 3 seasons, and I took out quarterbacks. So the top 36 running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends in the last 3 seasons in all
points.
What's that?
Total points or points per game?
Total. I did total points. Yeah. And one thing that really stood out was in non-PPR, look at this transition. I mean, 2019 was just a bad year for wide receivers, but if you just look at the top 12 players, in 2019, 11 of 12 were running backs. In 2020, 8 of them. In 2021, 7 of them. So that 2019 season is an outlier. But last year was a bad year for running backs. I'll point that out. But 2019 was terrible for wide receivers. So you can keep that in mind. But anyway, looking at the top 36 players, and you're thinking, who should I take in the first 3 rounds? Well, here's how it breaks down. In non-PPR, there is a slight edge to running backs. There have been 18, 19, or 20 running backs in the top 36 picks. In each of the last 3 years, there have been 14 to 16 wide receivers and 1 to 2 tight ends. So not a surprise. Edge to running backs, 18 to 20 running backs, 14 to 16 wide receivers, and 1 or 2 tight ends. Half PPR, though, it starts to flip. That sort of slight edge at running back goes to wide receiver. In the last 3 years, there have been 19 or 20 wide receivers drafted or finishing in the top 36. There have been 14, 15, or 16 running backs, and there have been 1 to 2 tight ends in the top 36. So it's almost an exact flip of running backs versus wide receivers in non-PPR and half PPR. Full PPR was crazy. I knew it was going to be an edge to wide receivers, but not like this. In the last 3 seasons, there have been 14, 10, and 12 running backs. That's especially noteworthy in the last 2 years. Like I said, 2019 was a bad year for wide receivers, but only 10 and 12 running backs in the last 2 years have finished in the top 36 of overall players. 24 and 22 wide receivers. It's basically double the amount of wide receivers that have finished top 36 compared to running backs. And there have been 2 or 3 tight ends that have finished top 36 in full PPR in each of the last 3 years. But I knew it would be pro wide receiver when you looked at who finished as a top 36 player, but I didn't realize it would be twice as many wide receivers as running backs over the last 2 years. So that really jumped out at me. And I don't know if that's going to stick or what, but you are now armed with that info, folks, and you can do whatever you want with it. So how about half PPR versus full PPR? Jamey, what's the difference there, half PPR versus full PPR?
I think honestly it comes down to a player-specific thing, because Derrick Henry is a good example of this because he's not going to be a dominant pass catch. Maybe he gets to the 35 catch threshold like he was trending toward last year, 18 catches through his first 8 games. So if he continues on that type of pace, then clearly that boosts up his value. But what you're drafting with him, you're drafting for his touchdown potential. So, when it comes down to the guys that sort of their numbers get swayed by the type of role that they have, so James Cook pushed up in PPR, probably a little bit down in half PPR because, again, the catches aren't as impactful. Nyheim Hines catches aren't as impactful. Deontay Johnson necessarily versus like a Mike Williams. Clearly, the touchdown potential for Mike Williams is going to outperform that. So it comes down to, I think, how you build your team. You're kind of start to finish. And when you start to get into certain conversations, I typically will lean PPR when I'm looking at that in terms of grading the player or how I'm looking to target players. But it kind of gets skewed a little bit depending on what part of the draft you are, what you need for your team. And how you want to sort of, construct your roster.
Do you think you go into it you're not gonna say, oh, I have to get 2 running backs with my first 3 picks like I did with non-PPR? Are you gonna skew more toward running back early than you would in a full PPR league, or are you gonna kind of draft like you would in a full PPR league?
I tend to draft more like I would in full PPR, but I'm not gonna pass up like Nick Chubb gets boosted up in half PPR than he does more so in full PPR. So, if it's between Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift in half PPR, I may lean more towards, Chubb in that regard because, again, it's trying to project how many catches Swift will have versus, what I expect the touchdown potential to be for Nick Chubb because I've seen it. Aaron Jones versus Chubb, those type of guys where in full PPR, they're certainly better, at least have the higher ceiling because of what their catch potential could be. So again, it's those type of things that come down to, player specific. But I think just in terms of, the start, I probably would look to go running back receiver as opposed to, running back.
Okay. So Dan, what would you say about half PPR as you compare it to your full PPR strategies?
So I do tend to agree with Jamey on this. It doesn't really change all that much for me when it's half versus the full PPR, with the exception of those player-specific examples, specifically at the running back position. I think that's really what Jamey nailed there. The guys like Aaron Jones versus the guys like Nick Chubb and those types of players. Now, having said that, just like in full PPR for me with half PPR, I am looking to go with my core tenet in fantasy, which is targets are everything. Chase the volume, chase the target volume. Touchdowns are fickle year to year. We can project great offenses year to year, but then again, there's injuries on the O-line. Some quarterbacks regress. Those things you can't trust, but you can trust role and volume, especially with some of these like big time rapport type situations with these quarterbacks, receivers that just go back to it. So I am looking at things like target share and valuing them highly. And I am looking to, just like I did today in our full PPR and our half PPR, start with a lot of receivers. I want 4 of my first 6 picks to be a combination of receivers and tight ends. It's a race for me. I know people say, well, look, receivers so deep, you can get so much talent later in the draft. I want those guys too. I want to get 4, 5, 6 receivers. My goal is to have the 4 most productive guys in my 3 receiver spots.
Even in
spot.
Half PPR, you're going to be
even
like
in
that?
half. Yes, I'm a hero running back drafter in half PPR. I'm still looking to get the 1 back.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I don't want to go 0 RB, but I'm not looking to get more than the 1 back. I think that honestly, over the years, it's become easier to find serviceable and playable running backs for your RB2 spot than it is to get production out of those back end receiver spots on your roster, wide receiver 3 or flex, because in my mind, in those PPR versions of fantasy, you should be looking to fill the flex at all times with a receiver. And even just the guys like Cordero Patterson that you've been able to find, and there's more examples that you look into over the years, you can find those guys who have some role in the passing game at the running back position and can get you a certain amount of points every week to be serviceable if you have that kind of high end production from your receivers. So ultimately, I am definitely looking to do that.
It's a little unfortunate that you don't have Dave on the show, because of the way that he typically drafts, and he lied to your face today, like I've never seen before, and you just accepted it during our mock draft when you said you prefer to come away from your draft with 3 receivers and a flex in PPR. No.
That's not what I said.
Would you rather have 4 receivers or 3 receivers and a running back? And you said, "Oh, I would much prefer to have 4 receivers."
I asked, would you rather be weak at running back or weak at wide receiver?
No, that was at the end. In the beginning, you asked, "What do you prefer? 3 receivers and a flex? Do you want 4?" Or somebody asked that question. Do you want 4 wide receivers? And he told you he wants 4 wide receivers. That was the biggest lie he's ever told in his life.
Biggest lie Dave's ever told. I've never seen 2 points per reception, and he went.
And then the draft unfolded. And his flex is Elijah Mitchell.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that was full PPR. I'm looking at a half PPR team.
No, but the reason I say Dave would be great for this counter argument, because I think most analysts, and I hope most people are drafting, and there's no slight at Dave, because Dave has a lot of success in the way he plays because he's very good at playing the waiver wire and making trades. But he still drafts very heavy toward the running back position. And I don't think format matters to him. I don't think, scoring matters to him. It's the way he likes to build his team. He believes, and he's had, again, success doing this, that he could find wide receivers late. Where I think most people are finding, based on the position, how the NFL treats the position, is you could find running backs late. It's the way I'll just go back to the team I built today. And again, it was PPR. So I came out of my first 6 rounds with 4 receivers and 2 running backs. And I really had planned to go, honestly, I don't want to say 0 RB. I don't necessarily want to say hero RB, but I was planning to go receiver, and then just seeing how the draft fell from there. But when I saw Swift was still sitting there, and after the receivers fell off the board, I didn't want to go Diggs, and I don't think maybe Diggs Adams. I don't think I wanted to do that. But after getting my 4 receivers, which I planned to play 3 of them in a flex, I just started throwing a lot of stock at Ramondre Stevenson and Darrell Henderson. I did that because I had Akers, but Chase Edmonds, and I'm trying to think other guys. Just I had a lot of them, just with the upside of what they can be and what they could become. In certain situations. To me, that's a much better build, and I think we found that in the PPR draft, and I think you'll find it in half PPR as well. Probably not to the same extreme, but we were staring at, and you said this with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't know how many people will say great value on him, but I think he qualifies. In round 8 through 12. There were so many of these high upside type of guys versus the receivers that we were, Adam, I know you like the potential of Kadarius Toney, but you probably took him around too soon. Chris is drafting Jamison Williams. There are just guys like Tyler Boyd.
I resent this so much. You're drafting Darrell Henderson and Isaiah, not you specifically, Isaiah Spiller, Rashad White,
sure,
and sitting here telling me that those are better picks than Kadarius Toney. Those guys.
No, I don't know if they're better picks. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying is like we were bumping up the value of certain receivers comparatively to ADP and probably comparatively where they should go.
Yeah.
Because of how much stock was put into the receiver position earlier, which I think is just better builds.
So you draft your receivers earlier and get those running backs later. Now, here's what you're saying. But in half PPR, I want to stick to the topic at hand, right? Half PPR, like I just want to go through this draft that Dave did. I'm looking at a June half PPR draft. He had the third pick. He took Derrick Henry. In the second round, he took Saquon Barkley. In the third round, he took Javonte Williams. And this was a league where we were starting 3 receivers in a flex. So he went 3 running backs with his first 3 picks. But then you can say he got DK Metcalf and Allen Robinson.
Excellent.
With his, right? So that's a good start right there. I mean, that's kind of, backing it up. It's half PPR. He goes Henry, Barkley, Javonte, and then...
Who was there instead of DK Metcalf? Do you have it?
Yeah. He could have taken McLaurin. And let's see who else. He could have taken McLaurin or Deontay Johnson or Mike Williams.
Okay, so swap out Metcalf, one of those 2 guys. I like it better.
Okay, and then Allen Robinson.
Yep.
But then my problem is round 6. This is where I disagree with Dave, is he took Devin Singletary, and I just think that's overkill in the half PPR format when he could have taken Allen Lazard or Christian Kirk or, somebody he liked there.
Totally.
And then he took Dalton Schultz after that, which isn't a bad pick, but now you still don't have a starting wide receiver. So I don't know. I mean, I think Dave, unfortunately, I think he makes it out to be that he's higher on running backs than he actually is, or rather that he's lower on wide receivers than he actually is. Because it's not like he doesn't draft wide receivers early.
I think with Dave, he
went a little too heavy. 1 pick too heavy there at running back.
I think with Dave, and this is what I respect a lot about the way he drafts, he does a lot of work on film. Like he watches these college players when we do a ton of good profiles for CBS Sports. Shout out there. Check us out during draft season, fantasy profiles. But he watched a lot of film on these receivers. So he believes in his ability to pinpoint the late receivers and to find values that other people can't find. And he believes that in that position more than he can locate running backs. We've had this discussion multiple times. He feels a lot more comfortable evaluating receivers and running backs on film. And that's just part of his evaluation process. My whole thing is, I think he can do that, but what was that for?
No, it's just, I don't want to speak for Dave, but that just doesn't matter, because when a running back gets injured, a guy you've heard of has this amazing opportunity. When a wide receiver gets injured, it just doesn't work like that. So you're not going to find the Amon-Ra St. Browns are much less common than the Elijah Mitchells. Right. So, all right. I'm sorry. I want to move on. I know you're making a good point, but we're so behind. So let me ask you this. Forget about non-PPR. That's just like a different world. When it comes to half PPR or full PPR, what changes your strategy more? Going from half PPR to full PPR or vice versa, or going from 2 receivers to 3 receivers or vice versa? The amount of receivers or the amount of PPR, basically. What changes your strategy more?
The amount of receivers by far.
100%.
Right. Yeah. I figured we were going to say that. So we do a lot of 3 receiver plus a flex drafts. Jamey, if we were doing a 2 receiver plus a flex draft, I didn't see, actually we did that on a Tuesday afternoon a few weeks ago, and I didn't see that much change really. But what would you tell somebody doing that format? Because I will say that I was in one league like that last year. It was only 2 receivers and a flex. And I think I messed up and I think I did it a little bit too much like a 3 receiver league, and probably should have taken maybe 1 more running back early or something like that. But Jamey, what would you tell someone in a 2 receiver plus a flex league instead of a 3 receiver plus?
I would still treat it like a 3 receiver league, but it just changes the flex. So, I think you just come away knowing, okay, as opposed to drafting 4 receivers, maybe in your first 6 picks or 7 picks, you probably just want to get 3, and then you start to maybe stockpile your running back depth, or you look at quarterback and tight end maybe a little bit sooner. But, and again, half PPR versus full PPR will change that as well. But I think it's still in your best interest, especially if it's full PPR, to start 3 receivers, based on what those guys tend to do in the depth of the position. So, and then you just start, again, taking a little bit more of the swing for the fences at the wide receiver spot. I just want to say real quick, just to tie back into, what Dave's philosophy is, at least the way we perceive it to be. When he drafts with us and other people in the industry, I don't think it works as well. When he drafts in his home leagues, he crushes those leagues because of what Dan said. He finds those receivers where and it's not just, and we're not talking about finding guys. He targets the guys that we are looking at in round 8, 9, and 10. He's getting those guys in round 12, 13, 14. So that's where he has a lot of success in his leagues. Not to say again that he doesn't have success in our leagues.
He does. Right.
But it's just different philosophy, I think, when you're drafting against other industry people that are pushing up wide receivers as much as we do.
Right.
But in any event, 2 receiver leagues with a flex, I think, again, you treat it more like a 3 receiver league, and you still sort of, build that way. 1 running back early, get value at the second running back spot if it presents itself. But obviously attack those wide receivers, and I think you have a better build that way.
Yeah, and play a little bit. You could play a little bit of a math game and think to yourself, quarterback is more valuable. I don't know if you do personally. When it gets to be a really deep league with a lot of positions, that's when I start to devalue tight end and specifically. But I guess I'll make a point more about tight end. The more positions you add, to me, the less important tight end gets. If we're at a 3 receiver league with a flex, I'm not there yet. If we did 3 receivers and 2 flexes, I'm going to devalue tight ends because they just don't score that many points. And, not necessarily Kelsey or Andrews, but I think for me, probably everyone after that, it's still an advantage, but you could start thinking about that. And then like the shallower leagues or even the non-PPR leagues where catches don't count, quarterbacks all of a sudden start making up a bigger percentage of your points. So I said shallower leagues. I guess I meant smaller rosters. Quarterbacks become a bigger chunk of your points. So you could take that approach and say, hey, the more positions that I add, the more points that I add, quarterbacks become less valuable. I'm not sure exactly where I fall on that. It's, I kind of go with the flow of the draft when it comes to quarterbacks, but anyway, let's talk about Superflex leagues real quick. This should be basically like a full episode or probably 20 minutes, but we'll do it in 2 minutes here just to give a quick overview. And we will definitely spend more time on Superflex throughout the coming weeks. Dan, what do you like to do in Superflex and or 2QB?
So yeah, we need to do this justice on another episode for sure. One of the questions we always get, or I always get from our listeners is, I'm doing Superflex for the first time. How do I approach quarterback? And that is the focus of your mindset in Superflex. Adam said it best at the beginning. Yes, you can flex a different position if you want, but don't get cute with it. I know a lot of people have tried it like, you know what? I'm just going to take one quarterback and I'm going to try to have the best possible flex ever. Look at these great running backs and receivers. Trust me, when you try it out, it will never play out as you like. So you do have to prioritize quarterbacks, and every league is different. That's the interesting thing about Superflex. You can look at the Scott Fishbowl where it's basically a race to the quarterbacks. You'll see 20 quarterbacks going in the first 3 rounds, maybe more. But there are some Superflex leagues where you will have quarterbacks drop into the 4th and 5th round, like a Kirk Cousins type, and you could build your team a little bit differently. So it is very important to know your league mates and go based on your draft history in your league. Also, you can think about it. If you're transitioning over to a Superflex league with your home friends, well, take a look at how they've drafted quarterbacks historically. Are they prioritizing the quarterback position even when it was 1 QB? If so, then you're going to want to draft these guys earlier because they are gold. There is a limited supply of quarterbacks. Unlike every other position that you're drafting, this is the only one that runs out of assets. So you do need to get, for me, you need to get 3. I am, just like Jamey said, I'm looking to get 2 quarterbacks for sure that I like, and then I am looking to target a potential upside quarterback 3 like a Daniel Jones. That's one example, but there are plenty. Jameis Winston, Tua, if you want to go a little higher than that. But yes, quarterback 3 becomes an incredibly important position to me, to the point where I will oftentimes draft it over my RB2.
Yeah, but you could make Jameis or Tua your QB2. They don't have to be your QB3. Is that too deep for you?
No, I think that's a great strategy. I think sometimes these middle tier quarterbacks in the QB, let's say 14, there are really good quarterbacks here. Let's say QB 16 through 22 range are overvalued. So you're better off taking the high end quarterback. And then for your QB 2 and 3, you make sure you get 2 starters. My whole thing is if you're going to go Jameis as your QB 2, which I'm fine with, make sure you get another quarterback that's starting for QB 3.
Okay. Jamey, anything to add on Superflex? Let me ask you this. Do you have an answer to this? It's okay if you don't. I want blank of my top blank quarterbacks.
I want 2 of my top 15.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting year because quarterback feels a little bit deeper.
So deep.
Than it was. Well, from a 1 QB league perspective, it feels a little bit deeper than it's been the last 2 years, because we're hopeful for Lance and Fields and Lawrence and Tua. then maybe we have, maybe even Winston, 17, 18 guys who are really good instead of just 12.
Even like a Derek Carr, right? Like, look at the weapons he has around him. He's QB6. How high can you rank him, right? He's 16. You're getting him 16th off the board.
Cousins is going 16th. I think Carr is more like 13 or 14. But yes, he could be 16 in your league.
Yeah,
sure.
Then, yeah.
Right. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit deeper, and maybe that changes things a little bit for you in Superflex. All right, this is a tougher one. 4-point per passing touchdown league versus 6-point per passing touchdown league. I have some comparisons here. Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow. In 4-point per passing touchdown leagues, Burrow scored 6 more points than Hurts. In 6-point leagues, he scored 42 more. Ryan Tannehill versus Carson Wentz. They both scored 27 touchdowns, but Tannehill had 7 rushing and Wentz had 1 rushing. And obviously Wentz had 6 more passing touchdowns than Tannehill. They were separated by 12 points in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues, and they were basically tied in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. Not a huge difference, but there's the 6 passing touchdowns, and it's worth 12 points. How about this? Matthew Stafford threw for 48, almost 4,900 yards, 41 touchdowns. He also ran for 43 yards and had no rushing touchdowns. He was QB 11 per game. QB 11 with 41 touchdowns and 4,900 yards. He was QB 8 per game in 6-point leagues, so it still does matter. He was better than Jalen Hurts in 6-point. He was worse than Jalen Hurts per game in 4-point leagues. Do things change a lot for you, Jamey, in 4-point versus 6-point leagues?
100%. I mean, you look at these running quarterbacks, and I think the tough decisions for me come down to Herbert and Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, and now maybe even Trey Lance. And I'm still going to lean toward Mahomes and Herbert, but it's certainly a tougher conversation. And by far, you're taking Hurts and Lamar and even Trey Lance for me over Brady, over Russell Wilson, over Dak Prescott, over Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray as well. Taking him over the non-rushing guys. Anytime you get these guys that are going to run. There's such a priority to target in 4 points per passing touchdown leagues because of just the difference that they give you with their legs.
Schneier, anything to add there?
No, I think Jamey nailed it. We're all about the Konami code right now with these rushing quarterbacks, and I'm with Jamey on this. I'm very bullish on a player like Lance, but a player like Lance for Jamey who just moved into his top 10. I'd ask you this now, Jamey, in a 6-point passing league, where would you rank him?
That's where I have him ranked. He's in
you would still have him in the top 10.
Yeah. We rank based on.
Yeah, you're making it based on the 6-point. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So where would you rank Lance in a 4-point?
He would probably be somewhere in the top 6. I think what would end up happening is I think he would be 7 because again, I still would take Mahomes and Herbert and Mahomes in that order over him because I think those guys will still do enough with their legs, but have 5,050 touchdown potential. But I mean, it's easy to take him over Brady, over Russell Wilson. I probably haven't ranked over Kyler, but similar type of range.
Who would you move down and up the most based on this format? I think that's probably what people would want to know who are playing in this, right?
Yeah, again, I think it just comes down to, if you want to take the 1,100, 1,200 yard rushing potential of Lamar Jackson over Herbert and Mahomes, so the way I have it ranked right now is Josh Allen's 1. He would not change. And it would be tough for me just to move Herbert and Mahomes from the 2 and the 3 spot. I probably would keep Herbert at 2 and maybe move Lamar Jackson to 3. Hurts would probably still stay at 4. I'd put Mahomes at 5. And then maybe Lance at 6, Kyler at 7.
Yeah, Kyler.
You don't want to get too cute with it because last year the top 6 in per game scoring in 4-point leagues was Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers. And then Jalen Hurts was after that. Look, you can still, if you're a pocket passer who barely runs, passing yards are actually kind of underrated in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues. You look at a guy like Matt Ryan through the years where he was consistently one of the NFL leaders in passing yards. He didn't change all that much going from 6-point to 4-point leagues because he was still throwing for a ton more yards than, the mobile quarterback, than basically everyone.
Well, it's also the touchdowns, not just the yards. I mean,
I get that, but if you don't have any rushing touchdowns, then you're hurting that. But If you
Right,
do
but you mentioned two guys there in Rodgers and Brady that don't run for touchdowns either.
right, exactly. But Brady threw for 5,300 yards. So
right, and Rodgers threw how many touchdowns?
37. And he ran for 3 touchdowns for what it's worth, which was, Kyler had 5 in 14 games. Anyway, my point is, it's not like those pocket passers totally stink in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues. You don't want to completely downgrade them. Like I think ranking Lance over Burrow even in 4-point would be kind of would require me to have a backup quarterback if I had.
Well, I think the thing about it is, and this is what you alluded to a little bit with the depth of the position, and I say this all the time. It's the easiest position to shoot for the stars, to expect the ceiling for a player, because there are so many quality fallback options, and it's very easy to take a shot on Lance and come back and draft a Cousins or Carr. It's very easy to take a shot on Jalen Hurts and get the same type of backup. And even if you want to go extend it to, Lawrence or Tua or Fields or whatever, they may not be collectively as good as Dak Prescott or Tom Brady if those guys do what Brady, if he does what he tends to do. I'm down on Aaron Rodgers because of the receiving core change, but clearly he still has the upside to be a league MVP again, especially dressing up like Nick Cage. So there's still a lot to like about those guys, but if and this is a huge if Jalen Hurts or Trey Lance has the Lamar Jackson season where the passing yards aren't huge, but the rushing numbers are incredible and the touchdowns are there, that's historical.
Okay, so let me ask this.
And you're chasing history, which is something you never want to do, but that's kind of what you're looking at.
What's more likely? Jalen Hurts or Trey Lance having the Lamar Jackson season, or Tom Brady having the 2021 Tom Brady season again when he was again number 2?
Brady, for sure.
Right. So you could chase Hurts and Lance that all you want, but you could just draft Brady, who was number 2 in fantasy last year, and regardless of format.
I totally understand that, and I think the thing that which makes drafting quarterbacks fun is you want people in your league to be chasing that position. You want people to be aggressively targeting quarterbacks because there's going to be somebody that inevitably falls in your lap. For me, in the draft we did today, I think it was round 9 or 10 or 8 through 10, somewhere in there, where Russell Wilson was just sitting there. And it was just so easy to say, okay, I don't love whatever's on the board. I have depth at running back and receiver. I'm fine with everything that I've done so far. Now I'm just going to plug in my quarterback. Typically, I'll wait another turn to do that, but it was just easy to take Russell Wilson as opposed to, okay, now I'll wait out and see what happens with Cousins or Carr, which is the 2 quarterbacks that people that are really following our mock draft see me take the most of. But I think you just play the board. It's an easy draft strategy. And this is something, even if you know your league, is going to be aggressive with quarterbacks. Okay, so it's not waiting until rounds 8 through 10. It's okay, 6 or 7. You're taking, your starter. And if your league is going to take 2 quarterbacks early because they want to get quote unquote the best value on the board, you can still get a very good quarterback. But you don't have to reach for that position ever. I think that's kind of a losing strategy at this point. Even if you do get a historical season from Josh Allen or Herbert or Mahomes, you're still going to get great quality production, hopefully, from 5 or 6 guys at that position because there's so much talent in the NFL at that spot.
All right, listen. One of the goals today was to talk salary cap drafts and fab. We did not do that. I apologize, but we'll do that in a separate show. I'm going to read a few questions here. First of all, Michael Stewart has 2 questions that are related. 1, Adam, are you and Dan in the same house? Just and 2, Adam, is that a Where's Waldo poster behind you? That's a good question. No, this is how you know we're not in the same house. This is a Simpsons poster behind me. And Dan doesn't like The Simpsons. He's that one guy in America that doesn't like The Simpsons. So
I never said I don't like The Simpsons. I don't love The Simpsons.
Well, that's a shame. That's still not good enough.
And that's not good enough.
We're actually all in the same house.
Yeah, we're all there. We have a fantasy football house that we rent for 5 months. Here's some emails from Jim. How does spending, assuming a $200 budget, change from 10 to 12 to 14 team leagues? Should you spend even more for high-end players in smaller leagues? This is a salary cap question.
100% your spending should go up when the league, if you're playing in a smaller league, 8, 10, and Now, having said that, there are still people I've played in a lot of these 14-team leagues that will go studs and duds strategy and spend high end, but the overall price should be higher for the players if the league's smaller.
Okay, next question is from Stan. Hey, Jerry, Terry, Larry, and Gary. No idea.
Jerry, Terry. All names for Gary on Parks and Rec, or Jerry, or whoever his actual name is.
Oh, yeah. Good call. Nice. How often does a guy who, quote unquote, breaks out during the fantasy and real playoffs or just late season maintain that breakout the following year? Anecdotally, I feel like I always draft those guys, Sony Michel, Brandon Ayuk, and they don't work out. Basically, just looking for any data on those guys that have 1 or 2 good months at the end of the year and actually maintaining their trajectory. I actually replied to this email. I could say 2 that came to mind in the positive side were Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. So those guys had 6-game stretches late in the year, and they certainly carried it over in their second seasons.
Akers could have been that guy if he didn't get hurt.
Amon-Ra St. Brown will be a really interesting case because you could still get him pretty late right now.
Akers, Dobbins could have been those guys, hopefully, but we don't know. Tyler Higbee is the biggest bust.
Oh, Higbee, yeah.
If you weren't really drafting him would be great.
No, you're
right. I know somebody who was.
Yeah, but the industry he was a mid-round pick.
Yeah, he was still late.
Miles Sanders is one that pisses me off because the last 6 games of his rookie season were spectacular when Jordan Howard got hurt. I think he was a top 8 running back. And for whatever reason, injury, role, this has not been able to replicate it.
I was staring at him versus Clyde Edwards-Helaire today at round 8, full PPR, and I couldn't get myself to take Miles Sanders. I just couldn't do it. I was happier to get Gainwell like 6 rounds later.
Anyone else come to mind? Maybe it's better for running backs than wide receivers. I don't know.
Amon-Ra St. Brown will be an interesting one. I mean,
Gabriel Davis.
Gabriel Davis, another great one.
I don't even count that because he had 1 good game.
Right, it was playoffs.
Well, no, I mean he had a few touchdowns at the end of the season too. Devin
Singletary will be a good one, but we already know they've drafted a guy that's going to take him off the field. But Devin Singletary was the top 5 running. Oh, Rashad Penny's going to be another one.
Oh yeah,
but these guys, their situations have gotten worse.
Changed. Yeah, both got great running backs drafted around them.
I buy it when it's a rookie who like a rookie 2nd-round pick running back who does it. I buy it a lot more than some other situations.
Bigger lie today, Dave, about receivers taking a 4th receiver to be his flex, or Dan continuing to say that he took Clyde Edwards-Helaire in round 8 when it was round 7.
I thought it was round 8. Damn. And that makes it even worse, Jamey, because I had like a early-ish pick in round 7, didn't I?
Yes.
This is from Bennett in San Diego. Do you think I should keep Javonte Williams in round 5 or Jalen Waddle in round 8, half PPR?
Javonte for me.
Javonte.
Easy.
All right. Thank you for this marathon show on this Tuesday night. Thank you all for watching and listening. And we will talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today. And that's it. Let's get on the show. I don't know what am I hesitating on? I'm going to hit the end button now. See you later.